Our next introduction is to somebody who Geoffrey and I knew very well, and that I actually got to know him through Geoffrey, and that's Richard Spencer, who is the Sustainability Director at the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, who are a massively august institution. In fact, so august, I can't quite work out why they let me come and do things with them, because they are really rather superb people. And Richard is one of the best. And I know that he worked very closely with Geoffrey. And on occasions, Geoffrey and I may have plotted about what we're going to try to get Richard to do next as well. And so in the nicest possible way, he's been a long-standing collaborator with our community. So Richard, all yours.
So thank you very much for inviting me here today. It's a real privilege to be here. And I'm absolutely delighted to. I come from Geoffrey's professional body, and I'm going to say this quite frequently through this. Geoffrey was exactly the sort of member that makes us incredibly proud. I joined the Institute in 2005, so quite a long time ago, and those first years were a bit like pushing jelly uphill, trying to persuade members in business and members in practice about this thing called sustainability. And Geoffrey was one of the first people I met, which was quite nice. I've been sort of routinely roasted by quite a lot of academic accountants since then, but Geoffrey was completely different. See, the fierce intellect that is so enjoyable to be around and to be stimulated by, but what a gentle and humble man. And I think that, coupled with his absolutely wicked sense of humour, was such a help and support to me as I have to confess, actually, I'm not an accountant. So I came over from the dark side, from investment banking, and Geoffrey kind of helped me navigate that kind of complex and unique species that is the chartered accountant and the academic chartered accountant. So, you know, I benefited enormously from his support and his wisdom and his humour. And Geoffrey played a huge part in the life of the Institute. He was the vice chair of our Research Advisory Board. And I should say that the chair of the Research Advisory Board is always a practitioner. So Geoffrey was the kind of leading academic at the Institute for a long time. And a really important role, because not only was the Research Advisory Board the part that gives out the cash for research, which is always important, but in a sense, the Institute navigates or kind of is the calibrator between the world of academia and our members in business and practice. And Geoffrey played such an important part in bringing those two pieces together. So his role there was just so important. But I remember in 2014, we have a governing body which is called Council. And in 2014, we asked Geoffrey if he would let us put his name forward to be co-opted onto Council. And Geoffrey said, you know, what an incredible honour, but what would I have to offer? And it was kind of like, cripes, Geoffrey, you know, what could you have to offer? The honour is entirely ours, and as expected, you will blow us away. My work, Geoffrey was so supportive with my work all the way through, and I was a sole practitioner for a long time and eventually built up a team, but Geoffrey was always there backing this up. And we've done some things at the Institute where we're punching way above our weight. And the importance of Geoffrey's support, and particularly on Council, was just fundamental. But what we got to, what I want to do is talk to you about a particular example, which I've called the Unaman question. And this was very quietly in Council, at the Council annual meeting. Geoffrey said, so what is the Institute doing about its carbon footprint? You're doing all this wonderful work with members. And of course, that's where our big impact is. We have about 160,000 members in a huge across the globe. And that's going to be our impact. But what are we doing to walk the talk? And it was just a very innocent, almost quiet question that he asked, and it just has changed everything. We now have the Sustainable Development Goals embedded as one of our key 5 strategic themes. We have gone carbon neutral, and we were the first professional body to do so. And we have a roadmap for driving out carbon emissions. And I come hot foot from our Finance for the Future Awards. Now, these are quite a prestigious set of awards that we do in conjunction with His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales Accounting Sustainability Project and Deloitte. And it's been going for 10 years now. And I was absolutely thrilled that the Prince of Wales, the chair of Deloitte, and our own chief executive agreed to change the name of one of the categories. The category was driving change in the financial community. And this has now become the Geoffrey Unaman Award for driving change. And I think before I come to talk about this, Geoffrey is so appropriate for that, because Geoffrey represents everything that I think our members should be about, and that's driving change. And that's what he did. So I want to do this as this is kind of our report card back to Geoffrey when he said, what is the Institute doing? So this one's for you, Geoffrey, and I hope we match up. So, of course, what I'm trying to say here is, of course, our influence is through our members. So we think we all know the big firms, but there are actually 12,000 member firms, all small and medium-sized practices that advise 3.5 million businesses. So there's this wonderful magic ratio here that if we can get our members in practice, engaging our members in business and other businesses to change on climate, on biodiversity, on social inequalities, we can really make a difference here. And Geoffrey recognised that. But equally, we have to walk the talk. So I just want to talk to you about what we've done. We did our carbon footprinting following Geoffrey's question. We measured our footprint, and into that footprint, we included what's called our Scope 3 emissions. So what that means is, I had to have this explained to me, so I'll explain it to you. It's not just the emissions, the carbon we produce. It's not just the carbon we produce by buying electricity, but it's the carbon that we cause by, and mainly by our own travel and by the travel of our staff and our volunteers. And rather than just say, oh, well, we'll just look at what we produce and what we buy in electricity, we will take responsibility for the emissions that our members and what we call our active members, so members of committees, members of council, come and support everything we do, and our staff. So we measured our footprint, which at Q3 2020, I should say that footprint was based on a pre-COVID figure. So we didn't use the get out of jail free card of nobody traveled to work, which would have got rid of about 60% of our emissions immediately. So that's our pre-COVID. And what we did, we purchased offsets against that whole footprint. Now we haven't sort of said, oh, that does it. We've got a roadmap, as you can see, to drive out emissions. But we thought right from the start, we will offset. And I'll come back to the offsets that we bought. We engaged Verco to help us do this. So it wasn't me as head of sustainability doing it internally and fiddling the figures and so on, get it right. We had external consultants who've held us to account the whole way through. We reckon we can get a 20% reduction by 2025, a 40% reduction by 2030, which does leave us with 60% of our emissions that sit outside of our direct control. So these are the ones we can influence. So how do we influence our staff and our members' travel? As you can see here, that travel accounts for about 66% of our emissions, the largest bit being our employee commuting and flights of business travel. And then our offices around the world, we have offices in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East. They produce around a third. And what we've done here is, this is just to show you the kind of, what we've done all the way along is publish our story. So it's all on our website, with the idea that if we're doing this, maybe that gives our members, particularly our members in practice, permission to start doing it. And so we've always sort of published, how did we do this? What did we do to get there? What were the sort of checklists that we used? And this is a bit of a warning, because in a sense that it's very easy to say we will try and do this. But the big word here is if. The profession has got to demonstrate that it can recover. I think we've lost the public trust in a lot of ways. And how can we recover it? Well, we can recover it by delivering on the thing that matters most to people, and that's achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. So I want you to think about our carbon neutral journey as an example of a much wider ambition. And I suppose it points to very much something that again, Geoffrey would have known, is start with something simple. Don't overwhelm people with the enormity of the task. And therefore his question wasn't, it was very deliberate and very well placed in that, you know, what are you doing about your carbon footprint is a very easy place to start and takes you on a much bigger journey. So we had been doing some work that Geoffrey's question accelerated in the 5 years before, between 2015 and 2020. Where we had started on LED lighting, we'd moved to all the things that sound kind of trivial, but change the way you do business. And we've had tremendous take up of all of this. So for instance, with flights, we have our travel policy prohibits any internal UK flights. And now this is looking forward. What are the projects we're going to do to drive out more emissions? So we're looking at removing gas as a power source. We're thinking about how do we use hydrogen, moving our data center to the cloud. And I have to say, we are not using Amazon platforms in Maryland, because of course they're all coal-fired. And as I said, changing our flight policies. But of course, we have bought offsets. And when we set out on our journey to buy offsets, we were very clear that we weren't just going to go into the markets and buy a standardized product. We wanted something that was going to have additionality to it. So what other of the goals could our carbon offsets work towards? And these are the projects that we've invested in. Clean drinking water in Cambodia, biogas plants in Vietnam, and forest protection in Kenya. All of those have social consequences and non-carbon consequences, if you like. And I should say that we haven't reduced our holding of offsets during this year as staff travels completely obviously collapsed. So we've maintained our purchases. And we published, as I said, our whole carbon neutral journey so that we can inspire others. And in terms of thinking about this question that Geoffrey asked, as a result of this, we've been and presented to what's called the Global Accounting Alliance, which represents the principal accounting bodies around the world. So the US accounting body, the Canadians, Hong Kong, South Africa, the big impactful accounting bodies. And many of those have now started a carbon neutral journey themselves. We've presented to chartered accountants worldwide. And if you think about Commonwealth countries, and we started inspiring some of those to change. We've presented to the signatories to the Green Finance Education Charter. So professional bodies outside of accountancy in the finance sector who are equally now exploring the possibilities of becoming carbon neutral. And we've been part of setting up the professional bodies Climate Action Charter. And again, using our carbon neutral journey as an example to others. So I'd say, Geoffrey, I hope you're pleased with what we've done. I'd say that your legacy and your impact goes well beyond that question. And for us, your contribution and your legacy is not just as an absolutely fierce academic, nor is it simply, or even complexly, as a professional acting in the public interest, but it's as somebody who has actually done something that drove change and has made a difference. And I think it's all of those that make us very proud that you are a member. Thank you.